The following program is produced by Project Bait and does not reflect the views of this station.
This is Mark Wells, and this is part 2 of the Wells Report on the Global African Presence For My People. In this edition of For My People, I continue with my conversation with historian Runoko Rashidi. For those of you who may have missed part 1 of this interview, Rashidi has been traveling the world documenting what he calls a global African presence for 32 years, a journey which has taken him to more than 90 countries worldwide. Rashidi is also the moderator of an online discussion group as well as the organizer of a tour group that travels the world, both by the name of the Global African Presence. With this in mind, I asked him to explain the purpose of his Global African Presence tours and online groups.
Basically, just exploring the African presence itself, trying to inspire our people, trying to bring light, trying to, as I don't know if it was Arthur Schoenberg or John Henry Clark says, trying to uncover the missing pages of world history, which is African history.
While many of us are aware that millions of Africans were shipped to the Americas during the transatlantic slave trade, the works of Rashidi and others have highlighted a black presence in countries where people don't generally think of African descendants. Places like India, Australia, the Fiji Islands, the Philippines, Papua New Guinea, and the Andaman Islands. As he told me in part 1 of this interview, Rashidi has already visited more than 90 countries. So I wondered if there was any one country or people that he never tired of visiting.
Well, there are certain countries that do stand out. Uganda is a country I love. I love Malawi. Wonderful people. It's been said that the greatest resource of any country is its people. And those 2 African countries I particularly enjoy. But the South Pacific, Papua New Guinea, Fiji, I can't get enough of that. It's as though the people are unspoiled. And so I think the South Pacific is the place that is my fantasy place as far as wanting to spend time, but it's also very expensive to travel there.
Although most accepted DNA analysis has shown that the dark-skinned peoples that live in these places are genetically very different from Africans, one has to agree that their physical resemblance to the peoples of Africa is striking. Considering these physical similarities, I asked Runoko Rashidi what he thought people should know about the inhabitants of these lands.
Well, the Fijians in particular embrace their African roots, perhaps more than anybody I've encountered. They're quick to say, we come from Africa. In terms of India, what's perhaps most interesting is the sheer number of black people. I've been saying for years now that India has the largest concentration of black people in any one country in the world. Australia, sisters and brothers have been there for so long that most of them really do see themselves as indigenous or aboriginal. They think they've always been there. And they don't care about DNA studies, paleontology, archaeology, any of those ologies. As far as they're concerned, they are indigenous, they're aboriginal to the land. Also in Australia, there was a branch of the Garvey movement in the 1920s, and a Black Panther Party was established there in 1975. So all of them have a black or African connection that's very, very pronounced.
Although the peoples of India are generally regarded as being a group of people that are not considered black or white, there are millions of people living in the southern portion of India that bear a striking physical resemblance to certain populations in Africa. Now, while some of these people, like the group known as the Siddhis, are thought to have arrived in India in the 18th and 19th centuries, it has been debated as to whether they came on their own accord or were brought to India as slaves. And while most of us associate African slavery with the transatlantic slave trade, many of us may not be aware that as many as 17 million African slaves from East Africa have been shipped to countries throughout the Middle East and the Indian Ocean region between the 7th and 20th centuries. But the history that Rashidi is attempting to expose is that the millions of people that live in places like India, Australia, and the various South Pacific islands have in fact been there for tens of thousands of years, going back to some of the first migrations out of Africa. Considering that today there are more than 1 billion inhabitants in the subcontinent of India, I was curious to know how many of these people Rashidi considered to be black or African descendants.
I would say about 300 million.
300 million.
And I think that the population of India is probably larger than 1 billion. I think India has the fastest growing population in the world, much faster than China. And at some point in time in the not too distant future will surpass China as far as the most populous country on earth.
Okay.
If black people and Africans are the same thing, as I tend to emphasize, then India certainly is the largest country in the world, in Africa, outside of Africa. So I guess a lot of it depends on how we are defining African. And that's why I deliberately said black people. So I repeat, India is the most populous country in terms of a black population. I would say India has twice as many black people easily as Nigeria and 4 times as many black people as Brazil. And I'm very confident in that assertion.
Now, if you take Rashidi at his word and there are some 300 million people in India who he considers to be black, that would mean that India has more black people than any single country in the continent of Africa. At last estimate, Nigeria was the most populous country in Africa with about 155 million citizens. Could India really be considered a part of the African diaspora? What do scientists say about the possibility? I will approach this question and more in part 3 of this Wells report on the global African presence for My People.
There are 3 basic necessities every business needs: a business plan, a bookkeeper, and a website. Call Project BAIT for all 3. Call 313-871-3333. That's 313-871-3333.
If you are in business, you should promote your business in the Metro Business Information Guide. For more information, contact Chris Woodard at 645-2282. That's 313-645-2282.
The preceding program was produced by Project BAIT and does not reflect the views of this station.
Hi, join me, Lexi, Daddy Peoples, and other gospel